I need some fun. Let me take a look at the NATO website now. But you start looking through it, and you actually start reading it. You're like, wait a minute. They talk about NATO actions that are still going on in Iraq. That's
Yeah.
not the North American or European continents. They talk about this involvement with the African Union and talk about different things going on there. They talk about these different things. And when you also look at their history and their stated purposes for being, now 80 years or so, almost 80 years after it's been signed, they have this thing called strategic concepts, which they implement from time to time. And when reading it, they talk about how now they look, and their primary focus is on diplomacy and trying to bring diplomatic means to bear in order to strengthen the alliance and protect each other. Although they also do acknowledge the fact that now we have to worry about terrorism, the rise of China and its aims and goals, in addition to the rise of the Russian Federation and what they're doing in Ukraine. And it's all in these strategic concepts. So they talk out of, my opinion, both sides of their mouth. We have to focus on diplomatic measures, but we also do need to realize that we have all this really bad stuff, and we're already pouring all of our, they won't say military assets, but they'll say their interests to backing Ukraine against the Russian aggression. It's a little bit of everything that spreads all over the page. And again, stemming from a very vague treaty from 1949, that in 1949, no one was going to have the understanding or the ability to understand what the world was going to be like come September 2001, what it was going to be like come January and February of 2026. Anyway.
I mean, and that's, yeah, and all of this stuff that we're discussing here, years ago, that I ended up taking, it was a UN peacekeepers and it was funny, UN peacekeepers and anti-terrorism class. So I'm like, and it had a lot to do with the military operations other than war. For the military guys out there that know about that stuff, you'll understand what we're talking about. And it's contradictory, and it's something that you're looking at where you're trying to understand the NATO aspect of it. And it's like, we'll get involved when we want to, but we may not get involved if we don't want to. So if it's something that Europe wants, then 9 times out of 10, it's going to be something that's going to happen. Like the actions when we took military actions under NATO in Kosovo and in Serbia and in other actions, other things. But when it's something that is further outside of it, that's where it gets tricky. And so that's the biggest problem. The one thing that they also, which I mentioned before, made great strides or tried to attempt to show that NATO was not trying to supplant the United Nations.
Right.
Because the United Nations was a relatively new organization as well. And that they viewed it as the United Nations at the time as their hope for the future. This is going to be the organization that's going to keep order in the world. Now, as one of my favorite commentators says, now the United Nations, basically the Mos Eisley of thugs and ruffians in the world now that are controlling the UN. But that's just a side comment here. I'll come at me if you want, but
I was going to say, I'll say it. If you just nominate the Republic of Iran to be on the board of, and the top executive board of human rights for the world,
right? But that back then,
maybe silly me. I don't know.
They designed NATO to be part, basically operating and working in conjunction with the United Nations, where they designed it, where the United Nations, NATO has a seat. It's a non-voting seat, but it's a seat on there as an advisory position, and that they incorporate all the different articles of the UN Charter, especially Article 51, into the NATO agreement. So, but so going forward, so now,
So Lou,
yes, sir.